As lungs burn and oxygen runs thin comes sumbisori, a sharp whistle of breath meeting air once again. It is more than exhalation. It is survival transformed into sound. An astonishing technique that restores oxygen quickly, preparing them for another descent. Enduring crushing water pressure, they remain underwater for a few minutes. Yet through remarkable physical adaptation, rivaling that of semi-aquatic mammals, they harvest the sea to support their families. Their weathered faces, carved by salt and time, stand as quiet testimony to lives spent not conquering nature, but living alongside it with restraint and respect. For centuries, Haenyeo have lived by one rule: take only what is needed, leave enough for tomorrow. They do not conquer the sea, they live with it. But today, this extraordinary tradition faces extinction. With the average Haenyeo now in their 70s, their way of life is fading. Recognized by UNESCO in 2016 as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity, Haenyeo are more than divers. They are living proof that resilience and harmony with nature remain among humanity's greatest strengths. And each time sumbisori echoes across the water, it carries a timeless truth. Life endures, courage rises, and some traditions are too precious to disappear.
In our headlines on this Friday, August 21st, here in South Korea. South Korea's exports hit a new high during the first 20 days of August, with semiconductors alone accounting for almost half of all shipments as AI demand continues to fuel an intense chip boom. Elsewhere, the Trump administration asserts U.S. allies are either, quote, with us or against us with regard to its economic isolation war against Iran, details of which are to be disclosed next Monday, according to U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Meanwhile, South Korea's heritage comes alive after dark as the National Heritage Night Festival turns historic sites into vibrant stages of light, culture, and history. Exports logged a new high during the first 20 days of August, powered by semiconductor sales, of course, while containers to China, Vietnam and the U.S. accounted for over half of the total shipments. Our business correspondent Park Jun-han reports.
Korea's August outbound shipments have reached a record high for the period in the first 20 days of August. According to preliminary data released by the Korea Customs Service on Friday, exports from August 1st to the 20th stood at $55.2 billion. That is a massive 56% jump compared to last year. Semiconductors drove the rally with chip exports skyrocketing 198.8% year-on-year to a record $26 billion. The chip boom is so strong that semiconductors now make up nearly half of Korea's total exports, accounting for 47.2%. Other tech products also saw massive gains, with computer peripherals jumping over 240%. However, not all sectors saw an upward trend, as passenger car exports dropped by 45.1% during the same period. Looking at major trade partners, exports to China more than doubled, surging by 118.6%. Shipments to Vietnam and the U.S. also saw significant jumps of 67.4% and 59.4% respectively. Together, these three nations account for 52.6% of Korea's total exports. During the same period, the country's imports increased by 19% to $41.2 billion, fueled in large part by stronger demand for foreign semiconductors, chip manufacturing equipment, and crude oil. Because record-breaking exports vastly outpaced imports, Korea posted a solid trade surplus of $13.97 billion, signaling that strong economic momentum driven by the semiconductor supercycle remains intact. Park Jun-an, Arirang News.
And producer prices fell for the first time in 11 months in July as a retreat in oil prices prevailed over a rise in food prices. Our Paek Joo-hee reports.
Korea's producer prices fell in July for the first time in 11 months as a drop in global oil prices outweighed the impact of a summer heat wave on farm produce. According to the Bank of Korea on Friday, the producer price index fell month-on-month for the first time since August 2025. The index had risen for 9 straight months from September through May, held flat in June, then turned lower again in July, coming in at 129.39, down 0.4% from June. Year-on-year, the index rose 7.7%, easing from an 8.6% rise in May, the fastest pace since July 2022. Looking into specific categories, industrial goods led the decline, falling 0.5%, as coal and petroleum products dropped 5.1% and chemical products fell 1.3% on lower global oil prices. Electricity, gas, water, and waste fell 0.6%, with residential electricity rates down 11.8% as Korea eased its summer peak usage pricing tiers. Services slipped 0.4%, dragged by a fall in financial and insurance services as brokerage commissions plunged 16.8% amid a stock market pullback. Agricultural, forestry, and marine products, however, rose 1.5%, with farm produce up 2.4%. Lee Hyung-ho, head of the Bank of Korea's price statistics team, said that prices of agricultural, forestry, and marine products were driven up in July due to the heat wave, poor harvests for some vegetables, along with mass die-offs at fish farms from high water temperatures. But he also said that the rise is still more modest than a year before, when heavy rain and heat pushed the same category up 5.6% in July 2025. The central bank says the heat wave's effect has been limited so far in early August, but will depend on how it is for the rest of the month. He noted that a temporary cut in telecom charges last August created a low base effect, making this year's year-on-year figures look steeper. Paek Joo-hee, Arirang News.
Over in the U.S., the government's intervention in the Treasury market is rippling through stocks, bonds, and the broader financial markets. Our Cha Yun-kyung explains.
Global financial markets are facing renewed turbulence as U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's aggressive market intervention is coming up against stubborn economic realities. Following the Treasury's announcement to double long-term bond buybacks to $4 billion per operation, yields that had been soaring as well as the dollar have temporarily cooled. However, long-term yields quickly resumed their upward trajectory. Experts point out that a $4 billion cap is not an ultimate solution, as national debt has surpassed $40 trillion for the first time. Secretary Bessent stated that the figure holds no special magic and that the U.S. can grow its way out of the debt mountain. Despite such optimism, structural pressures continue to push borrowing costs higher. Analysts note that corporate bond issuance by big tech giants fueling the AI boom is driving up real interest rates. This strategy has also sparked fears of fiscal dominance, raising concerns that political pressure to lower interest rates could undermine the Federal Reserve's independence. On Thursday, St. Louis Fed President Alberto Musalem firmly distanced the central bank from the Treasury's actions, emphasizing that monetary policy is set independently, entirely focused on inflation and the labor market. Meanwhile, ripple effects quickly hit Asian markets. On Friday morning, South Korea's benchmark KOSPI opened sharply lower, dragged down by overnight losses on Wall Street. U.S. stocks tumbled on Thursday due to a combination of climbing Treasury yields and weak retail earnings from Walmart. Looking ahead, Secretary Bessent hinted that Treasury buybacks could exceed $4 billion and unveil further fiscal consolidation measures early next week, arguing that current yields fail to reflect true economic fundamentals. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
Also in the U.S., the Trump administration is pressing American allies to join an unprecedented campaign of economic isolation against Iran. Our Kim Yo-jong has the latest.
The U.S. is preparing to impose what it calls the toughest sanctions in history on Iran. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told a broadcaster on Thursday that the measures are aimed at collapsing the regime while urging U.S. allies to decide whether to join Washington's pressure campaign. Bessent said the sanctions could also reduce the need for major U.S. military operations against the Islamic Republic. His remarks came after President Donald Trump pledged tougher economic measures against Iran.
Well, we have things that we could sanction. We have very draconian sanctions, and we'll see what happens. The blockade has been 100% successful. No boats have gotten into Iran, but they are getting in for other places. But we'll see.
Trump announced plans on Wednesday to further squeeze Iran's economy, declaring an economic D-Day in a Truth Social post. He also threatened major penalties against any country that continues doing business with Iran. The move comes as the war approaches the 6-month mark, with little sign of a diplomatic or military victory for Washington. Iran's foreign ministry condemned the U.S. sanctions as economic terrorism, saying they would hurt ordinary Iranians and amount to crimes against humanity. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, meanwhile, dismissed Trump's latest post as a diversion from America's own economic problems. Separately, the U.S. military said it remains committed to defending the U.S. homeland and its allies following North Korea's latest missile launches. U.S. Pacific Command said Thursday it saw no immediate threat from the launches. The statement came after North Korea fired around 10 short-range ballistic missiles from Pyongyang toward the East Sea at around 5 p.m. Thursday. Kim Junho, Arirang News.
And in light of Thursday's missile launch by Pyongyang, diplomats from Seoul, Washington and Tokyo held talks over the phone on this Friday. According to Seoul's Foreign Ministry, Director General for Korean Peninsula Policy, Baek Yong-jin, spoke with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts David Wylsall and Takashi Ariyoshi. The three officials reportedly assessed the regional security status while addressing future response options. Also, according to the ministry here, North Korea's missile test launches activate an immediate and separate consultation channel among South Korea, the U.S. and Japan. Also, North Korea's Kim Yo-jong appears to be launching a smear campaign against South Korea, calling it pitiful and accusing President Lee Jae-myung of double-dealing. Our Song Yu-jin reports.
Kim Yo-jong, sister of leader Kim Jong-un, released a statement late Thursday night through the Korean Central News Agency with sneering remarks against Seoul. In response to the scaling down of the Ulji Freedom Shield joint military exercises, she mocked that a single order from U.S. President Trump left South Korea in a pitiful plight of no longer being able to play war games. Calling the alliance a master-servant relationship, Kim accused South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung of duplicitous words and deeds, referring to Lee's expression of respect and gratitude for Trump's decision to scale back the drills on social media, while discussing self-reliant national defense and securing independent military capabilities domestically. While North Korea maintains its hostile posture towards South Korea, analysts have commented that Kim Yo-jong's latest statement can be read to reaffirm North Korea's stance of leaving room for its relationship with the United States. The routine South Korea-U.S. joint exercise Ulji Freedom Shield ended on Friday after only 5 days, scaled back from its originally scheduled 11-day run. The August exercises are usually split into 2 parts, defense and counterattack. But this time, the exercise will conclude after carrying out only the first part. Song Yu-jin, Arirang News.
And the Unification Ministry here believes the Trump administration has initiated a potential shift in the state of affairs on the Korean Peninsula by calling for fresh dialogue. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
South Korea is expressing optimism regarding recent diplomatic developments between the U.S. and North Korea. On Friday, Unification Minister Chung Dong-young at a meeting with religious leaders called this a tectonic shift.
Broadly speaking, a tectonic shift initiated by U.S. President Donald Trump has begun on the Korean Peninsula. While it is too early for either optimism or pessimism, a summit between the U.S. and North Korea can be anticipated. I believe this could serve as an opportunity to realign the geopolitical situation on the peninsula and, by extension, Northeast Asia.
Jong also said earlier in the day that the past year was a time of frustration. This comes as he has repeatedly emphasized that a summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will be constructive, and this will be able to change the current status of deadlock. President Lee Jae-myung as well, since his time as a lawmaker, has continuously supported resuming Washington-Pyongyang negotiations. He previously directly offered to act as a diplomatic pacemaker to Trump's peacemaker and hasn't let go of the term to facilitate a resumption of talks between the two.
적대와 대결의 에너지를 평화 공존과 공동 번영의 동력으로 바꿔내겠습니다. 페이스메이커이자 한반도 평화의 당사자로서 그 역할과 책임을 다할 것입니다.
Meanwhile, the government says acting as a pacemaker does not mean South Korea is being bypassed. A high-ranking Unification Ministry official stated the core priority is setting the table for dialogue to break the status quo. This suggests Seoul prioritizes the revival of diplomatic momentum over immediate direct participation. The official added Washington will not recognize the regime as a nuclear state, maintaining complete denuclearization as the ultimate objective. 김도현, 아리랑 뉴스.
South Korea's heritage comes alive after dark as the National Heritage Night Festival turns historic sites into vibrant stages of light, culture, and history. Our culture correspondent Cho Young-eun was out and about.
As the sun sets, historical sites across Korea take on a new life, transforming into vibrant cultural spaces. This week, we head to Suwon, Gyeonggi-do Province to experience its National Heritage Night and see how the event brings Korea's heritage to life after dark.
I'm from Suji, Yongin. It's my wife's birthday, so we came here after work. It's our first time here. I'd only heard about it, but they've really done a great job. It's beautiful, and it's a great place to take a walk.
I heard they had done a great job showcasing the national heritage here, so we came for a walk. The night view is also beautiful, so we're really enjoying our time here.
Now in its 10th year, Suwon's National Heritage Night features media art performances at Hwahongmun Gate and light illuminations around the Yongyeon Pond. Suwon Hwasong Fortress, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, provides a unique setting. Originally built in the late 18th century by King Jeongjo, the fortress preserves a centuries-old history while standing alongside the city's modern life.
I heard the National Heritage event had already ended, but then I found out it had been extended, so I came by chance. We also visited Hwasong Palace during its nighttime opening, explored some of Suwon's beautiful spots, and came to enjoy some good food.
With interactive programs taking place throughout the weekends, visitors can explore the heritage sites while enjoying live performances and hands-on experiences.
Running through August 30th in Suwon, the National Heritage Night can be experienced in other cities across the country, each event offering programs inspired by the local heritage. This event offers a new way to connect Korea's heritage with contemporary culture while preserving its historical value. Cho Young-eun, Arirang News.
And in other news now, Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics swept an annual design awards with 62 wins between them, cementing their status as global design powerhouses. Our Hong Seo-jung has more.
Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics said Friday that they have each won 45 and 17 awards at the International Design Excellence Awards 2026. Known as IDEA, the awards are organized by the Industrial Designers Society of America and are considered one of the world's 3 most prestigious awards for design. The awards recognize designs based on innovation, commercial viability, and improvements in user experience across 20 categories. Samsung won the newly introduced Impact Award with its home appliance accessibility design, which is recognized for its sustainability. The design improves accessibility for users by accommodating users' individual physical needs, including differences in mobility, vision, and hearing. A bronze award went to the Infinite AI air purifier featuring a pop-up cleaner booster that automatically falls away when not in use. Samsung was recognized with bronze awards, bringing the company's total up to 9 for the portable memory, which is a premium portable storage device with the outer case made solely from recycled aluminum, and the mobile origami package, which uses a single sheet of paper using an origami method. Continuing its strong momentum, Samsung also won 12 prizes in the brand and communication category at the Red Dot Awards. The company's privacy display, first adopted by the Galaxy S26 Ultra, won the main Best of the Best award for its standout feature that restricts visibility of its screen from an angle to protect user privacy. Additionally, the Moving Style and Vision AI Companion visual branding took home top prizes. LG Electronics also made its mark at the IDEA Awards, winning 17 awards this year. The home robot Cloyd, LG PuriCare System Air Purifier, and 10 other products were named finalists. LG also earned 5 bronze awards for products including its LG Signature OLED W, LG Therma V heat pump, and LG Purifier Air Mini. It is worth noting that Cloyd Signature OLED W, the LG PuriCare System Air Purifier, and the LG Gram Pro achieved the triple crown by winning all 3 major international design awards, which include the IF Design Award, Red Dot Design Award, and IDEA. LG also received awards in the packaging design category for its lifestyle audio brand, including the X-Boom audio series and LG Sound Suite. As Korean tech giants continue to gain recognition at prestigious international design awards, their competitiveness is extending beyond functionality to encompass design and user experience. Hong Sa-jung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, amid rising foreign competition in the domestic car market, Hyundai and Kia are turning to virtual roads and 3D printed parts to reinvent how they design and build their future cars. Our Kim So-young explains.
Behind the wheel of this simulator, a massive curved screen recreates a real highway in front of the driver. This is the driving simulator studio at Hyundai and Kia's R&D center in Namyang. The simulation is so precise it captures every bump and dip of the actual road, down to the smallest detail.
This lets us accurately test the car's performance before we even build a physical prototype.
That same approach runs through every stage of development. To fine-tune noise reduction and prevent leaks, engineers are now 3D printing custom parts and components.
Our classic cars often don't have original blueprints. That's exactly where 3D printing makes the biggest difference.
This push comes at a critical point. In May 2026, Tesla's Model Y topped passenger car sales in Korea. It is a signal that's pushing Korean automakers to double down on digital innovation to stay competitive in the race to build the car of tomorrow. Kim So-young, Arirang News.
This is the world now. The United States Navy has sent a fresh aircraft carrier to the Middle East to relieve a ship whose crew has been at sea for months supporting the Iran war. U.S. Central Command said on Thursday that the USS George Washington arrived in the region on Wednesday. It takes over from the USS Abraham Lincoln, which had gone more than 250 days at sea without a break. Reports of life on the USS Abraham Lincoln described crew stress, poor mental health, and shortages of food and hygiene products. The USS George Washington came from Asia, leaving that region without an American carrier strike group. In Nigeria, an overloaded boat has capsized, killing at least 50 people. Most of the dead are children. The boat went down on Thursday in Nigeria's northwest Sokoto state. An official with the National Waterways Authority said about 40 children were among the dead. A state lawmaker said most of those on board were between 10 and 15 years old. He said 16 people were rescued. Residents said the boat was carrying farm owners and laborers hired to harvest rice. In Peru, a magnitude 6.7 earthquake struck the central Andes on Thursday. The United States Geological Authority said there were no initial reports of casualties or damage. The quake was deep at 99 kilometers below the surface. The head of Peru's Geophysical Institute said on Thursday that the depth prevented major damage, so the earthquake caused no impact. Peru sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, where 85% of the world's quakes happen. Prince Harry and his wife Meghan are moving back to the UK this month, 6 years after they gave up royal duties and left for the United States. A person close to the couple said they will move from California to somewhere outside London. Their children, 7-year-old Archie and 5-year-old Lilibet, will go to school in Britain. They will not live in a royal residence and will remain non-working royals. King Charles only learned of the move on Sunday. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Light rain is coming and going at the moment here in Seoul, but there are downpours in parts of Gyeongsang-Bukdo province with rainfall rates of around 30 millimeters per hour, prompting heavy rain alerts. Most of the rain in Chungcheongdo and Gyeongsang-Bukdo province will taper off by tonight, but Seoul and the surrounding capital area, along with inland areas of Gangwon-do province, will stay wet through tomorrow morning. After a brief break, scattered showers will move across inland areas nationwide tomorrow afternoon, bringing another round of 5 to 40 millimeters of rain. Meanwhile, the heat is still going strong across the southern parts of the country. With hot and humid air moving in, many places could see tropical night or tropical night-like heat with lows of 24 degrees in Seoul and 25 degrees in Busan. And tomorrow afternoon, the heat will stay hot and humid, with Seoul reaching 30 degrees and Gwangju 33 degrees. Looking ahead, late summer heat will continue, with temperatures hovering around 33 degrees Celsius. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session. Do stay with us.
For thousands of years, one breath has endured, carrying patience and respect. More than a martial art, it is the Korean way of life. Taekwondo, connecting the world. Always with us, always a part of everyday life. That is Taekwondo. Now, powered by science, Taekwondo evolves once again. Powered by speed, precision, and data, smarter training drives motivation and engagement. United with science, Taekwondo is shaping the future. Though languages and borders may differ, we are united through the shared spirit of Taekwondo. Beyond the Olympic stage, passion comes alive. Taekwondo One is becoming a global sports tourism destination. Every day, we write a new chapter of harmony. The spirit of Korea meets the boundless energy of K-pop. No longer just a sport, Taekwondo has become a driving force of K-culture, sharing Korea's spirit and style with the world. Kicks in rhythm, precision in every beat. Through the powerful movements of Taekwondo, we become one. Taekwondo, humanity's most dynamic icon, continues to prove its limitless potential to the world. Where curious footsteps pause, the vibrant spirit of Taekwondo fills the air. Inner strength, respect for others. Now a familiar part of everyday life, Taekwondo has become a celebration shared worldwide. A beautiful culture united through Ye, the spirit of respect. Connecting heart to heart. This is the world Taekwondo creates. We now strive to safeguard Taekwondo's community training culture as a treasured heritage for all humanity. The pride of Korea, Taekwondo.
held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the status UN summit.
A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
From extreme weather events to record-breaking longevity, South Korea is facing two very different challenges that raise big questions about how the country prepares for the future. Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Press Perspective. It is Friday, August 21st here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. South Korea is showing two very different sides of its future, great exposure to extreme weather and some of the world's most dramatic gains in longevity. For more on this, I have Stephen Borok with Japanese weekly news magazine Nikkei Asia here in the studio. Stephen, welcome back.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with us. Colin, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Stephen, let's start with this summer's extreme heat and torrential rains. In fact, recent floods caused major damage in southern Korea. How severe is the situation there?
Based on some of the video that I saw on Gojedo, it definitely looked very, very serious. A local media quoted officials as saying that the province had recorded a record rainfall, something like a whole summer's, a normal entire summer's worth of rain in just a couple of days. So this definitely caught the drainage system down there off guard and led to some pretty serious property damage. I mean, I don't know if if we have like a comprehensive figure for just how much damage was caused, but the people who were in the most vulnerable areas, the most kind of low-lying places that saw the bulk of the water. I'm sure there were businesses that have had to shut down. I'm sure there were people who had to leave their homes. So there's definitely been some extreme weather events in kind of isolated areas. But like when we talk about the weather here, I would just like to flag, today I was looking at the data that's been logged so far this year. This has been a somewhat mild summer. I mean, with the exception of the end of July and then a very serious heat wave that took place in the first week of August. If you look at the two kind of standard, what I take as being the two kind of standard measures, which are tropical nights and what the Korean government refers to as pogyeom days, so like days of extreme heat, days when the temperature exceeds 33 degrees, those have been lower than the past few summers. The past few summers, we've seen just consistently high temperatures, record-breaking frequency of tropical nights and of days of extreme heat. But this year, the numbers we've seen this year are kind of more in line with what South Korea tended to record 10 or 20 years ago. In that you see extreme heat at the sort of peak areas of summer and then a kind of still hot, a kind of dull, humid heat as we see today in the past few days. So I just think when we talk about the extreme weather events, we need to be careful not to paint a comprehensive picture that this has been a super extreme summer on the whole. I mean, I hope that the folks in South Gyeongsang province will receive the help that they need, and I hope that we don't see any more really outstanding weather events like this. But on the whole, I'd say this has been a fairly measured and, still uncomfortable but not hellacious summer.
Right then. Beyond national borders, Colin, I understand Europe has reportedly lost 1% of its GDP to this year's heat wave. What kind of damage has it seen?
Yes, there's a study that a company did recently about the GDP loss, European GDP loss related to climate change. It's been circulating in the media lately, and what's been focused on especially is the breakdown country by country. Which countries have been affected to what degree? How does it differ country to country within Europe? Examples have included in France. France is well known for its use of nuclear power, and nuclear power plants have to discharge heat somewhere. Usually it's into rivers, and if the river temperature is already high, if it crosses some threshold, the plants can't operate. So that threatens power generation and distribution there in France. As well, in Germany, the Rhine, the Danube, rivers like that are used for internal shipping. There's a lot of internal waterway shipping that goes on there in the way that it doesn't really in Korea. And of course, if those rivers, when they get low, that makes shipping more difficult, although a lot of sort of World War II artifacts and remains have been discovered as well. So there is an archaeological side to it at the same time. Or you have a country like Italy, a very tourism-centric country, you could say. The economy, a big chunk of the economy is tourism there. And they've experienced some hotel beds going empty because of the unusually hot summertime, for example. So are there lessons for Korea in all this? Well, Korea has had a tourism boom, but it's still nowhere in the league of Spain or in Italy or of France. That's less applicable. As I say, there's not much internal waterway shipping here. There is waterway shipping, but around the coast, so that's not quite so affected by water levels. But nuclear power, there's about a third of the total power supply here that's nuclear. So that might be something to watch out for in the future, what water temperature levels can do to the power generation here. That's the main, I think, takeaway, to use an overused word, that Koreans may have from the report about Europe's GDP and climate change.
Right then. Also here in South Korea, Stephen, the term climate insurance is gaining quite a bit of attention. What exactly does it mean? And do tell us a bit more about the measures in place to fight against heat.
I think what this kind of boils down to is a growing recognition of heat as something that's potentially dangerous and potentially harmful to the human body. I mean, Colin and I grew up in North America, and I think the conversation around hot weather was very different back then. It was something that people really wanted more of, something that people really looked forward to. For me, growing up, there was always a lot of lamentation that the summers were not longer, the summers were not hotter. People wish that they could do the fun things that, require hot weather, water play and, being outside and fishing and all the rest. But I think the increasing intensity of heat and the increasing frequency of it is just kind of driving home the point that the world is warming to temperatures that are at times hostile to human existence and hostile to kind of functioning outside. So really what this is a kind of provision of, in line with the, the general process of insurance. You pay into something and then you can receive coverage if certain eventualities take place. So, for example, if you get a physical ailment that is caused by heat, such as heat exhaustion or heat stroke, and you need to visit the hospital, you can claim some kind of insurance fees toward that. Or if you are in a line of work where extreme heat impedes your ability to work, if you're a construction worker and temperatures reach a certain point and your work is halted. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are already in place for other forms of extreme weather, like flood insurance or ice storms or wildfires. We've seen some pretty serious wildfires in Korea in the past couple of years. So I would take this just as another sign that heat is becoming, a potentially disastrous presence in the climate here. And this is just one way that policymakers are trying to grapple with it and try to mitigate its effects.
Right. And speaking about its effects, Colin, we also hear in terms like climate refugees and climate inequality. What more can you tell us about the uneven repercussions, perhaps, of the climate crisis?
Yes, I think climate refugee is getting to be a fairly familiar concept these days. At least the idea has circulated a lot. The idea being that in certain countries or parts of countries that will be afflicted more severely by climate change, you'll see more migration out of those areas. You'll see refugees coming from those areas, whether they're coming to Korea or other countries. And it's even become a concept discussed domestically here in Korea, in that we have people escaping the climate domestically or within Seoul. One example would be, this is the sort of theme that comes up every summer in the Korean news, but the conditions in what are called 쪽방촌, or they're literally divided room villages. And these are neighborhoods that consist of usually old, not very well maintained, not very large buildings that are subdivided and subdivided and subdivided. So people live in these rooms that are in some cases smaller than a prison cell and sometimes for very long terms. So they're some of the most poverty associated forms of housing in Korea are in these neighborhoods. And so every summer when it gets hot, there are articles published about how it's difficult to keep cool in a place like this. I mean, the ventilation and the climate control is about as good as you would expect in these places. And you can't install air conditioning, oftentimes because you don't have the money or because there's not enough space. These are all sort of chikbaijao, or there's no window. And so what to do about that it becomes a bigger and bigger subject every single year. And some residents of these 쪽방촌, if they have the means, they escape, they become refugees to the local PC방, or big internet cafe, or some business with air conditioning, with climate control during the day, and they go back at night if possible. So that's a form of climate refugeeism within the city, if you like. But residents of these neighborhoods are also often laborers, if they're not older people, which is increasingly common, or they're migrant laborers, or they're construction workers, and they as well have been having trouble getting work lately because construction projects will be halted if the heat is excessive. So you could get a break of days or even weeks if the weather gets hot enough. And I think that's one respect in which watchers of the Korean economy will really take notice. Because it's so rooted in construction and has been really since the 1960s, if you see an apartment tower being built and it just stops for a week because of the heat, you'll think, okay, something's really gone wrong. So I think that will become an increasing part of the conversation, not just about climate change, but about the Korean economy going forward.
Right, for sure. Let's move on to another story, Stephen. A new study says Korean women could become the first in human history to reach a life expectancy of 90 by the year 2030. Do tell us more about this.
Well, that's the big takeaway, that Korean women could kind of set this global record for life expectancy. The question is why? What habits and what systems and what infrastructure are in place that will potentially allow them to reach this threshold. I think there's a few things that you could point to. I mean, South Korean women tend to have a kind of genetically healthy body mass, not a lot of excess fat. This is a country that I think a big part of Korean life expectancy is that most South Koreans live in walkable communities. I believe that there's a very strong correlation between living somewhere where you can spend your daily life just moving around and completing tasks and having contact with other human beings instead of living in a very car-centric sort of place. I think if you look at most of the places in the world that have very long life expectancy, a lot of them are walkable. And there's also just, the average Korean diet is generally pretty healthy. It's a lot of produce, a lot of low-fat protein such as tofu. It's just a lot of. I would say that in the past, one thing that might be helping this happen is that Koreans have very small families, and parents are super focused on feeding their child nutritious food, keeping their child out of danger, inculcating healthy habits in their children, and so avoiding risk. I mean, Colin and I are both sometimes around small kids in this country, and I can tell you that your average Korean parents are very quite risk averse and very quite closely managing what their kids are up to, not leaving their kids unattended, and all the rest. So, I mean, I guess this is just like a kind of natural outgrowth of some pretty healthy habits that have been in place in this country for quite a long time. What the study doesn't mention too much is why South Korean men may not, like what's keeping them from reaching this threshold. I mean, I know rates of tobacco and alcohol consumption tend to be higher among men than women. Maybe South Korean men are involved in some more dangerous occupations, physical labor and things of that nature. So this is probably going to be another case where the rest of the world is looking at Korea and wondering if there's something worth emulating. How are they achieving this admirable, desirable goal? Koreans are already famous for excellent skincare, so this is another feather in the cap, I think, perhaps.
Right then, speaking about the rest of the world, Colin, the U.S. remains near the bottom, I understand, in life expectancy because of health inequalities. How do Korea and the U.S. compare when it comes to healthcare, do you think?
Yes, this is a statistically tricky matter because it does seem like a contradiction. You look at the United States of America, the wealthiest country in the world, you would assume that it's going to have the best outcomes because of that. Then you see the statistics and it comes up short in a lot of ways. So you think, what's going on here? Partially it's because of the diversity of the United States. And you have a diverse country, especially compared to South Korea. You're going to get a diverse outcome. You're going to get a diverse selection of outcomes. If you have a diverse population, people just won't be the same. I mean, by definition, I'm saying something completely tautological. So to compare, if you want to draw a comparison, as you say, between South Korea and the U.S. more directly, it's best not to look at the statistics nationally in aggregate, but to compare South Korea to a more relevant population within the United States. So there are certain populations, I think, if you look at only them, if you isolate them in the U.S., they won't be that much worse off in these medical outcomes, health outcomes, than South Koreans. Maybe not as good, that's true, but I think the matter of relevance is something we shouldn't put out of our minds. I think back to the economist Milton Friedman, when told that there's no poverty in Scandinavia, said, that's funny. There's no poverty among Scandinavian Americans either. And so what he's getting at is, again, something about the diverse populations that exist to an extent apart from each other. And if you compare South Koreans as a whole to Korean Americans, I think you'll find a much closer set of statistics than South Koreans versus Americans as a whole, although I think still, as Stephen said, the lifestyle is different, and Korean Americans are in general, like most Americans, on the heavier side than South Koreans, and they have certain lifestyle factors that are not as healthy as Korea, some that are maybe a little healthier, maybe less smoking, for example, but I think it's not quite, if you compare relevant population to relevant population, the gap is not as wide as it seems.
Right then. Stephen, generally speaking then, what do you suppose is attracting international attention to South Korea's healthcare system?
Well, that's a good question. I think one thing that the rest of the world is perhaps seeking to benchmark is just the use of technology in how South Korea treats patients. South Korea is a country that has a growing population of elderly people who are going to require care, and a workforce that is always, either shrinking or remaining kind of stagnant. Healthcare and elderly long-term care are definitely areas that are known for some rough working conditions, not very high wages, and so I think the people who are running those kinds of facilities are definitely always looking to use emerging technologies like robotics, artificial intelligence to try to find ways of monitoring patients, try to deliver the things that patients need. So for example, if you can, instead of sending a nurse around to every old elderly person and having them manually check their heart rate or their respiration rates or whatever, presumably that's an area where where artificial intelligence is fairly amenable to be kind of scanning this data and then putting out digestible conclusions. This person has these types of physical measures at this point, and here's the way to treat them given this person's medical history, all the rest. And then another one, a kind of more sensitive one, I think, is the use of robotics. Can you have an automated apparatus to feed someone, to maybe even help them take their medicine, or maybe even provide them companionship? The foreign media every couple of years or so will put out an article, in this rural Japanese city, there's this robot that provides, conversation and companionship to the old people who live there and is, prolonging their lives in that way. So I think Korea is an interesting case in that it has, as I said, an aging population, labor shortages, and a quite advanced technological manufacturing infrastructure. So it's logical to think that this will be a place where solutions emerge to problems that are increasingly prevalent in industrial societies all over the world.
Right. Colin, The Guardian claims that foreign women are coming to South Korea in search of better healthcare. How is this trend being explained?
Yes, this was an interesting piece because, as I've said many times on this broadcast, coverage of Korea in the West, be it the U.S. or the UK, does tend to reflect the anxieties of those countries more so than sort of the nature of Korean society today. But it's not uninformative, and this article actually makes an interesting observation because it's focused not just on women, but on black women who come to South Korea. And that's an eye-catching headline. Why would that be? And then the one point made was that they didn't see themselves as receiving a very high standard of care in the U.S. and so came here to get usually some package of checkups, just get everything checked out, every medical service they needed all at once, which was at a much lower cost than it would be in the US and was much more quickly done, quickly and easily, usually in one location, and packaged and sold in a way that was tailored to them as consumers. And this is maybe what I would underscore in this article more than anything else. It was about the difference in user experience, consumer experience of the US medical system versus the Korean one. Here, and I say this having in mind, next week I've got my own biannual health check. You can get everything done in one space. You book it at a hospital, you go in, and they test you for all kinds of different things. Usually these are tests focused to some degree toward the health conditions that afflict the local population. So for example, stomach cancer screenings are very big here. I don't belong to the population that is more afflicted by those, but I get the screening and everything, and I'm not sorry to do so, but I do think it could be a growth industry in Korea to tailor these packages to foreign tourists, whatever country they happen to come from and whatever group they belong to and whatever risk factors they have as a result of that. But yes, as I say, it's an eye-catching article, but it does reveal a difference in these medical systems, even in the US, where, as we say, wealthiest country in the world, and the medical system or industry there is not absolutely undeveloped. In some respects it is the most developed, but the complaint again and again is that it's not good for its users. And there's also this sort of cultural difference that in the US there's not the sense that you go to the doctor whenever you're feeling bad. Here in Korea, I think I'm right in saying people go to the doctor, or the hospital as they say, for every sort of even very mild ailment they feel. It's straight to the doctor, who's going to be probably near you. It's not going to be hard to get there. You can go on the day, not make an appointment. And so there's a culture of just getting everything checked out preventatively or very early on when you're feeling symptomatic. And that's not so much the case in the US, especially with populations who are less economically advantaged, shall we say. And the lower down that scale you go, the more likely you only go to the hospital if it is an emergency. And at the lowest of the low, you go when you feel like you're about to collapse, and you go to the emergency room, and it's going to be a very expensive visit. You probably won't pay it. Someone will. But again, it's not the most efficient way to run things. But for many consumers of medical care in the US, they feel like it's the only way. So there is a cultural difference, there's a technological difference, and there's, above all, an organizational difference to be considered.
Right. Despite South Korea's merits with regard to its healthcare system, Stephen, it ranks near the bottom of the OECD for its medical workforce, including physicians. What are the concerns that have been raised?
Well, so just to be clear, what we mean, I think, is the prevalence, the number of medical professionals relative to the size of the population. This this is not a qualitative measure assessing these folks' performance or anything like that. So, I mean, this reminds me of 2 or 3 years ago when there was that very big strike of Korean doctors. I did a bunch of interviews with doctors and I came up with the conclusion that the doctors see the system that they function in as kind of paradoxical. They see it as being, one of the best in the world in many cases in terms of meeting patient needs and, speed of visits and, the very low level of preventative deaths in the Korean medical industry. But doctors here are also under a ton of pressure because, as Colin laid out, there's a high frequency of doctors visit. There's the way that the system is set up is that the doctors are in their offices all day and they're just seeing a kind of deluge of patients all generally for short time. So somebody comes in with some kind of an ailment. If it's something simple, the doctor can just prescribe medicine or carry out some kind of simple procedure. If it's something more challenging, they will refer them to a larger hospital. So the challenges that a lot of doctors laid out to me is that aspect of it, and also just the fact that the reason that there are not more doctors in Korea, as they explained it, is that doctors tend to earn less money than they do in some other rich countries, and doctors tend to avoid the undesirable places to live in the country, the undesirable forms of medical practice. For example, reconstructive surgery. There's a lot of some Koreans, when they have a body part that needs to be rebuilt, will sometimes even need to go overseas to get that done because there's nobody to do it here. And one that really I thought was kind of eye-popping is that in the Korean medical system, doctors who are found to have committed malpractice can even face criminal censure in some cases. So like if a doctor or a nurse does something that the legal system deems to be grossly negligent or even malicious, they can face they can go to prison, which I think is something that might make somebody who has, that really excellent student who has a lot of options, they might choose to go into a field where they don't have to confront that possible eventuality. So, but generally I would say that the Korean medical system is very good at a lot of things. It's very good at just kind of keeping this very densely populated and this very hard living country at work and in school, and hopefully that can remain the case and whatever kinks can be worked out.
Right, indeed. On that positive note, we end today. Stephen, as always, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Colin, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
So, from preparing for a more volatile climate to preparing for a much older population, the question now is how ready is South Korea for the challenges ahead? That's all this week. Thank you for watching.
Thanks.